What's up, guys? This is Danny from geeksofdoom.com, and I got a chance to go to the theater today to see the Fathom event screening for the 80th anniversary of what most critics would agree is the greatest film ever made, 1941's Citizen Kane by Orson Welles. This movie was rated #1 as the greatest film of all time multiple times. AFI did their big top 100 movies of all time list. This rated #1, and then they did it again 10 years later, and it's still ranked #1. Do I think this is the greatest movie ever made? I've seen this movie several times. Haven't watched this movie before today. Haven't seen it probably in about 15 years or so. Definitely saw it in college. Probably saw it once more after that. I can say that this is, for me, it is not the greatest movie ever made. It's not the greatest movie that I've ever seen. But I will go to bat that Citizen Kane is one of the best films ever made. I had a friend on Facebook today when I had posted that I was going to see it. A lot of people, I got the usual responses. Oh, it's overrated. It's not that great. One of my friends put it best. It's like if you played the Beatles for somebody today for the first time, they would probably be like, this is it? This is the band that people consider to be the greatest of all time? And being a history teacher in my day job, I'm able to, not to toot my own horn, but I pride myself at being able to use historical context and to try to put myself back into the shoes of somebody who watched this for the first time in the 1940s, or even 40, 50 years ago, like in the late 60s, early 70s. And watching this film today even, you gain an appreciation for it in a different way because you see how many films have adopted the techniques and the filming styles that Citizen Kane used probably for the first time back in 1941. I was noticing one thing, like IMDb even said that the opening credits, or really the lack of opening credits, where it just shows the movie title and then goes into the movie without telling you who's in the movie, the stars, who wrote it, who directed it. You don't find really that out. All you see is RKO, Orson Welles, Citizen Kane, and then the movie begins. And you don't get credits until the very end. And that's basically how movies, most like big budget blockbusters, are done today. You go to see even an MCU movie, you don't get who's in the movie at the beginning. It just gives you the title, and then at the end of the movie you get the cast. Orson Welles was born in 1915, which he was 26 years old when he did this. He directed it. He starred in it. Acting everywhere from being in his early 20s to being a senior citizen or a declining older man. He wrote it, he co-wrote it, he produced it. There's a very famous, infamous, legendary battle, Hollywood stories about the battles over the writing rights to this film. If you just look at the people involved in the making of this movie, you understand why it is considered the classic that it is. Obviously, Orson Welles is an all-time legend. He won, he co-won Best Screenplay for this film, along with Herman Mankiewicz, who they just made a movie about last year that was nominated for a bunch of Oscars. David Fincher just made a movie. Mank is about Herman Mankiewicz, the guy who wrote the screenplay, the first draft of the screenplay of this movie. There are legendary battles and stories over who actually wrote this movie. One of the most famous film critics, Pauline Kael, wrote a story about how it was really Mankiewicz and that Welles took credit for it. Welles always argued that Mankiewicz did a draft of it and that he worked on it. from most people agree now that it was a joint effort, and they share the Oscar for it. And one thing that I noticed today that I never noticed the first couple times I saw this movie was how funny the movie is. It has this like wit, this like cutting, sarcastic wit to the screenplay that I absolutely loved, and it drew some laughs from me and the few other people who were in the movies enjoying it. This movie was edited by Robert Wise. Robert Wise would go on, and keep in mind this is 1941, or 20 years later, in 1961, Wise would go on to win Best Director for West Side Story. He would win Best Director again for doing The Sound of Music. The guy's won 4 Oscars overall, and here in 1941, he was the editor. The cinematographer here was Greg Toland, and he was an Oscar winner, I believe, for Wuthering Heights in 1939. I think that's what IMDb said. But I bring up Greg Toland and Robert Wise because another thing that I noticed watching this today was just how brilliantly filmed this movie is. If you've never seen Citizen Kane, the movie goes back and forth between time periods. There's a lot of flashbacks. There's a lot of people. The basic thorough line of the movie is Charles Foster Kane, played by Orson Welles, has died. And they're trying to do this big story to find out the meaning of his final word, which was rosebud. And so the reporters are going and they're interviewing all the people alive that knew him and could tell stories about him, and they're telling stories about him, and we go into flashbacks. And the way that it's filmed is just brilliant. The way this movie is lit it makes it so beautiful. There's so much shadow work in this movie. There are scenes that are completely in shadow. It's almost like the movie is intentionally mysterious, where the whole idea of the movie is they want you to find out, they're trying to find out what the mystery of what Rosebud was, why it was Charles Foster Kane, this eccentric multimillionaire, why it was his last word. And the movie itself feels like a mystery because it's so cloaked in shadow, and even while it's cloaked in shadow, it looks so beautiful. The way that the camera lingers on faces, but only like half the face is lit. And you could see there's an amazing scene late in the film when Charles Foster Kane's second wife, who is a not so great opera singer, is singing, and he's watching her, and it's just focused on his face, and he knows she's not good, but he's determined to believe that she's good, almost where if he can get the audience to see him believing, they'll believe. And the way the camera lingers on him is just brilliant. The reporter who's going around to interview all these people, you almost never even see the interviewer. You never see him, the reporter. He's like, you only see him from the back. These are techniques that, again, if we saw them today, we'd be like, wow, that's brilliant. And this was 1941 from a 26-year-old brilliant filmmaker who was making a movie that even at that time was considered taboo because the movie is based... This is one of those films which is a fictional non-fiction story. Charles Foster Kane obviously is not a real person, but he's so blatantly based on William Randolph Hearst, the yellow journalist, from the New York Journal. Xanadu, Charles Foster Kane's pleasure palace that he builds in this movie is based on Sam Simeon, which is considered now a national monument out in California, where William Randolph Hearst lived. Even the story about him, his first marriage ending because of an illicit affair was very similar to the taboo stories about Hearst. The edited by Robert Wise, cinematography by Greg Toland. How about this one? The score. This was one of the first Hollywood scores of Bernard Herrmann, one of the most legendary film composers out there, who would become infamous in Hollywood for Psycho, the music from Psycho. This is just, it's a brilliant movie. And I feel that there is so much that even a modern audience can appreciate. Now, do I say that, everyone in the modern audience will enjoy it? Probably not. Just like a lot of the modern audience would not like the Beatles if they're hearing them for the first time today. But if you're open to experiencing something from the past and judging it in the context of, this was made a very long time ago, and not only is it great, and not only does it have lasting greatness, but it influenced the things that you like today, then I do think that modern audiences can appreciate this. Fathom Events does a great job when they bring these classic films. My mother and I got to go see The African Queen a few months ago. That's one of my mother's all-time favorite films, and it was celebrating an anniversary. Fathom Events brought that back into theaters. Citizen Kane, like I said, whether or not we agree, it has been ranked one of the, if not one of, the greatest movie ever made. Now, if you were going to put a gun to my head, please don't. But if you were going to say, Danny, what is the greatest film ever made? I would probably go, hey, look, I'll stay with the 1940s. I would probably go with Casablanca. And Casablanca is another movie where I totally get if a modern viewer watching it for the first time goes, oh my God, that was really cheesy. That movie invented every cliche in modern, epic romance films. Aside from the fact that it's hilarious, aside from the fact that it's a great war movie, I would probably go with Casablanca. But I'll tell you what, Citizen Kane is definitely ranking up near the top of my list. I highly recommend everyone, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend watching it for the first time. And if you have seen it, and if it's been a good number of years like it was for me, I highly recommend giving it a rewatch through modern eyes, especially when we're living in a time where a guy not too different from Charles Foster Kane just got done being president of the United States. Now, do I think the fictional character of Charles Foster Kane is similar to, Donald Trump? They definitely have some similarities. I'm not going to say that they're clones, but they're very similar to each other. You can definitely draw parallels and comparisons, and I think it would be really interesting to give this film a first-time watch or a rewatch. It is streaming free on HBO Max, so if you have HBO Max, you can go and watch Citizen Kane right now. So that's it. I'm going to try to hit up a few more of these Fathom event movies later in the year. Citizen Kane is on HBO Max. If you haven't seen it, give it a watch. And this has been Danny from Geeks of Doom. Have a great day, and we'll see you very soon.